Hey guys, tonight we're diving straight into a story so surreal, so chaotic and so deeply Philadelphia that even the Liberty Bell would crack again just hearing about it. We're talking about Medetomidine, the new nightmare fuel showing up right after Tranq, a drug so potent it makes people collapse faster than your New Year's resolutions. And yes, it's somehow turning 2026 Philadelphia into a live-action what not to do with your life instructional video. Before we get too cozy in this pharmaceutical fever dream, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if this brand of unhinged historical sleep tour energy genuinely makes your night a tiny bit better. And thank you for suggesting this topic. You have an uncanny knack for picking the exact flavour of chaos this channel thrives on. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and whether it's also inexplicably 2:47 AM for you right now. It usually is. Something about my voice attracts the sleep-deprived and the spiritually exhausted. And honestly, same. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise burrow into your blankets like you're hiding from 2026 itself and get comfortable. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what life feels like when your city suddenly becomes a testing ground for a tranquilizer strong enough to knock out a moose? Do people just nap on sidewalks now? Is falling asleep upright the new Pilates? Is there a correct etiquette for stepping over someone who's frozen mid-scroll on TikTok because they accidentally sniffed the wrong thing behind a Wawa dumpster? Does Medetomidine come with a punch card? Buy 9 collapses, get 1 free. Why does it hit the streets faster than you hit snooze on Monday mornings? Why are pharmacists suddenly the main characters? And should Philadelphia's tourism slogan now be, "Come for the cheesesteaks, stay because you physically cannot get up"? All excellent questions. Because congratulations, you've just woken up in Philadelphia. The year is 2026. The streets shimmer with neon reflections, the Scepter bus is late, as always, and someone in front of you is sleeping with their eyes open, upright, mid-bite into a pretzel, and no one bats an eye. Breathe in that crisp city air, light notes of exhaust, hot pretzel steam, and the faint pharmaceutical tang of a narcotic stronger than your laptop charger after a long day. Welcome home. You awaken on the cold concrete of Kensington Avenue, unsure whether you fainted, time-travelled, or simply lay down for a nap because everyone else seemed to be doing it. The city hums around you, sirens, trolley bells, and the soft thud of someone else collapsing like a tranquilized giraffe in the distance. Welcome to Philadelphia's new normal. For a moment you remain perfectly still, blinking up at a sky that looks slightly hungover. A thin dusting of city grit coats your clothes, and the air tastes faintly of pretzel steam and despair. You try to sit up, but your spine produces a sound reminiscent of someone stepping on a broken ruler. A pigeon watches you with mild disappointment, as though you failed your first test as a Philadelphia resident. You glance around, noticing 3 people asleep, in positions that can only be described as yoga for the dead. One man is folded over a trash can like he's trying to hug it. Another is slumped against a newspaper box in a pose that suggests he simply powered down mid-conversation. A woman sits upright with perfect posture and completely closed eyes, an impressive feat you mentally file under life goals. You brush dirt off your clothes, which only makes you dirtier, and slowly stand. Your legs feel wobbly, as if you've borrowed them from a newborn deer who deeply regrets agreeing to this arrangement. The street moves in a strange rhythm. People walking, stopping, forgetting how walking works, momentarily collapsing, then waking back up like nothing happened. You try to blend in by adopting an expression of mild inconvenience and emotional exhaustion, which seems to be the city's default facial setting. A Scepter trolley rattles past, its bell chiming like a polite ghost. 2 passengers lean heavily on each other, asleep in synchronous swaying. The driver seems awake, though you can't be totally certain. He has the serene, blank expression of someone who hasn't processed a single emotion since 2014. He gives you a nod that communicates both sympathy and a quiet "good luck, buddy." You check your pockets, hoping for a phone, a map, or a note that explains why you're here. Instead, you find a single stale pretzel bite and a scepter transfer from a date that doesn't make sense. Comforting. You decide to walk, though walking in 2026 Philadelphia now feels like navigating an obstacle course designed by a deeply tired demigod. You weave around people sleeping on sidewalks, people sleeping in doorways, and one man sleeping half inside a bike rack like he got stuck mid-teleportation. As you pass under the L tracks, a cold breeze rushes through, carrying that familiar Philadelphia perfume. Exhaust, fried onions, and the faint medicinal tang of something that definitely wasn't approved by the FDA. Someone collapses gently behind you, as delicate as a Victorian noblewoman realizing her corset was laced too tight. You turn, but everyone else simply steps around her with the casual ease of locals who've adapted to the fall and rise cycle, like it's a fun regional folklore. You consider finding help, but every person who looks conscious seems halfway to unconscious, and every person unconscious looks perfectly content. You approach a man leaning against a mural of a giant eagle. "Hey, are you awake?" you ask softly. His eyes open just enough to show he is technically alive. Then he nods, slumps sideways, and slides down the wall like a melting candle. Somewhere in the distance, a street preacher shouts, "This isn't even the weird part," which, in its own way, is deeply unsettling. You check your surroundings again, taking in the vivid graffiti, the bustling food carts, the never-ending stream of collapsing pedestrians. And you realize something important. If you're going to survive this bizarre new Philadelphia, you must accept the cardinal rule of the neighborhood. People aren't ignoring emergencies. They're just taking turns collapsing. Welcome to day one. Good luck keeping your knees locked. Your first goal is simple: breakfast. But in 2026 Philadelphia, even grabbing a muffin feels like a tactical operation. Every shelf leans suspiciously, every customer looks vaguely asleep, and the cashier hasn't blinked in 9 minutes. You move carefully, trying not to inhale anything you can't spell. The bell above the door jingles behind you, the happiest sound in the store, because everything else feels like you're entering a low-budget apocalypse movie filmed entirely on someone's cracked iPhone. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead with the same energy as a dying firefly, buzzing softly like they haven't been paid in months. You step between aisles filled with half-restocked shelves and customers drifting around like sleepwalking Sims whose AI got overwhelmed. You head toward the pastry rack, which leans so dramatically it looks like it's trying to escape the building. A man in a puffer jacket is frozen in front of it, hand hovering above a blueberry muffin as though time paused mid-snack. You gently maneuver around him, whispering a polite "me bad" in case he's actually conscious, and just processing at 0.25 speed. The muffins sit in their little plastic containers, each one slightly smashed, as if they've seen unspeakable things. You pick one up and give it a cautious sniff, not because you're a food snob, but because everything in Philadelphia now requires a quick smell test to ensure it hasn't been dusted with mystery powder. The scent is fine, mostly sugar, with a faint undertone of this was delivered at 4 a.m. by someone who immediately fell asleep on the sidewalk. Your next challenge is the drink section, where half-open energy drinks sit abandoned beside perfectly upright bottles of spring water, tiny metaphors for ambition versus surrender. You reach for a bottle, only to notice the person next to you slowly tilting sideways, drifting toward the floor like a majestic tree falling in slow motion. You instinctively stick your hand out, but a nearby grandmother beats you to it, catching the person by the hood and propping them against a stack of paper towels without breaking eye contact with her scratch-off ticket. Clearly she's done this before. You open the cooler and retrieve a drink, noting the thin layer of frost on the handle, a reminder that machines at least are still doing their jobs. You take a moment to appreciate the cool air hitting your face. It's the closest thing to a spa treatment you're getting today. But your real obstacle is still ahead. Checkout. The cashier stands motionless behind the counter, eyes open, mouth neutral, expression blank, like an NPC waiting for someone to hit the interaction button. You approach slowly, placing your muffin and drink gently on the counter. The cashier doesn't react. You clear your throat in the softest, most respectful way possible. Nothing. You try again, this time with a volume level suggesting mild friendliness but not aggression. Still nothing. For a moment, you wonder if Medetomidine has claimed yet another victim, but then, miraculously, the cashier moves. Their hand rises with glacial slowness, presses a single button, and returns to its original position. The register beeps weakly, like it's also exhausted. "That'll be, something," the cashier murmurs, voice cracked and unsure, like they're reading your total from a dream. You tap your card because the machine refuses to accept physical bills anymore. Apparently they're too heavy for its current emotional state. As you gather your breakfast, someone behind you collapses gently onto a display of discounted chips. You glance back. No one reacts. Not even the cashier, who begins blinking again with the determination of someone rebooting their entire nervous system. You step outside, muffin in hand, drink secured under your arm, breathing the crisp Philadelphia morning air. You survived. You acquired food. You avoided accidental sedation. In this city, that counts as a gourmet experience, and as you take your first bite, slightly stale, slightly squished, you savour the victory. Breakfast of champions, indeed. As you walk, you start to understand the rhythm of the city, the sudden collapses, the long, frozen stares, the way people slump mid-sentence like puppets whose strings were cut by an impatient toddler. Medetomidine doesn't hit gently, it hits like a bored linebacker. You start to notice patterns, little tells that someone is about to go down. First comes the slow blink, longer than a normal blink, shorter than a nap. Then the gentle head wobble, like they're agreeing to something only they can hear. And finally, the signature knee buckle. Elegant, inevitable, mildly alarming. It's the city's new choreography, and everyone seems to know the steps except you. You pass a man leaning against a lamppost mid-rant about parking tickets. "I swear, the city," he says, before his eyes glaze over and he folds neatly into himself like laundry. You pause, wondering if you should help, but a woman walking behind you casually adjusts his hood, props him up again, and keeps moving. Clearly you're the only one still emotionally invested in gravity. Your nervous system, you realise, feels too awake, hyper-aware. You can practically hear your heartbeat narrating your life choices. Every sound feels magnified. Sirens echo. Crosswalk beeps pierce your ears. And somewhere a man is snoring loudly enough to vibrate the pavement. You begin monitoring your own body with paranoid enthusiasm. Is that a wobble? Did your eyes just unfocus? Are you blinking too slowly? You're not sure, but suddenly you're practicing Olympic-level deep breathing to prove you're still conscious. Medetomidine is everywhere, floating through conversations, drifting underfoot, sprinkled into the very vibe of the city. You overhear two guys debating at a bus stop. "Bro, I'm telling you, it's not the drug. People in Philly have been collapsing for years." "Yeah, but not like professionally." You keep walking before you're drafted into the argument. A man beside you suddenly freezes mid-stride, arms stiff at his sides, face tilted upward like he's trying to remember the name of an old classmate. You wait to see if he'll continue. He does not. Instead, he tips gently backward into a recycling bin with a soft whoomph. You flinch. A teen on a bike rides by, glances down and says, "He'll be up in 5, as casually as someone commenting on the weather. You pass a reflective window and catch your own reflection, wide-eyed, shoulders tensed, posture aggressively awake. You look like someone auditioning for the role of person who is definitely fine, officer. You try to shake it off, but the city keeps offering new opportunities for panic. A woman collapses into a pile of laundry bags. A sleeping man slides slowly down a church staircase like he's melting. A jogger stops mid-run, sighs dramatically, and takes a nap on the curb. You step carefully over a man who appears to be asleep on top of a fire hydrant, an impressive feat of balance. He snores contentedly, blissfully unaware of the physics he's defying. You whisper, "Good for you," because honestly you're starting to admire the confidence. Your hands feel a little shaky now. Your brain keeps asking, "Are we safe?" in the same tone you use when you smell expired milk. You do a discreet self-check. Toes, wiggling. Knees, holding. Posture, upright but suspicious. Breathing. Yes, you are doing that probably. You pass a cluster of paramedics performing what looks like group meditation. They sit on the back bumper of their ambulance, sipping coffee, with the exhausted tranquility of people who have accepted that the city is running on nap slipstream logic now. One gives you a nod that says, "You look conscious enough." The more people you watch collapse, the more you realise how strangely peaceful it is. There's no panic, no screaming, just gentle crumpling, soft sighing, and casual bystanders turning fallen limbs so no one blocks the sidewalk. You're basically living inside a relaxation app designed by someone with a questionable sense of humour. Still, you stay vigilant. If Medetomidine is the toxic X of tranquilizers, your nervous system is the friend desperately saying, "We can do better." But as another person faceplants quietly into a bush beside you, you have one undeniable thought. At this point, your nervous system might be the only one left in Philadelphia still trying. You wait for the bus, watching commuters wobble like inflatable tube men in the breeze. Someone falls asleep standing up. Someone else collapses gently into a pile of soft pretzels. When the bus finally arrives, the driver is awake probably. The bus hisses to a stop like it too is exhausted from carrying Philadelphia on its back. The front door opens with the resigned energy of a parent who's seen too much. You step inside, gripping the rail with a cautious determination of someone entering a funhouse that masquerades as public infrastructure. The interior smells like a mixture of coffee, cold air, and the faint medicinal tang of a drug crisis nobody fully understands. Half the passengers appear conscious. The other half resemble mannequins that have been strategically placed around the bus to discourage optimism. You move toward an empty seat beside a man wearing 3 hoodies. His eyes are at half-mast, fluttering occasionally like he's trying to reboot. You sit down slowly, just in case gravity decides to betray him mid-slump. Around you, heads bob gently, some nodding in rhythm with potholes, others lolling dangerously close to seat backs or strangers' shoulders. The driver starts the route with a dramatic sigh, gripping the wheel like a gladiator preparing for the battle. You watch his eyelids carefully. Are they drooping? Are they stable? Does this man know where he is? Hard to say. He pulls away from the curb anyway, which you choose to interpret as a good sign. The bus lurches forward, and the standing passengers sway like a single, anxious organism. One young guy in earbuds remains perfectly upright, asleep but somehow balancing like a Jedi. A woman clutching a box of donuts collapses sideways, but a fellow commuter catches the box mid-fall. Not her, just the donuts. Priorities. You glance out the window as the city drifts by in a dreamlike haze. People nap on stoops, lean against lampposts like unplugged robots, and fall asleep in line for coffee. A man on a bike swerves slowly into a shrub and stays there, legs still pedalling gently, as if he's cycling through a meadow in his mind. Back inside, the driver announces the next stop, though his voice sounds like someone pressing the low battery button on a human being. The PA system crackles, repeating the announcement in a tone that implies the bus may or may not stop depending on whether it feels like it. The bus hits a bump, and 3 passengers simultaneously slump sideways like synchronized swimmers performing the world's slowest routine. One man's head lands softly on your shoulder. You freeze, unsure whether to wake him or just accept that this is your life now. His snoring is surprisingly delicate, like a small exhausted squirrel. A woman across from you stares at her phone with intense focus. Then her hand loosens, the phone drops into her lap, and she tips forward until her forehead rests gently against the seat in front of her. No one reacts. No one even looks up. This is simply the scepter vibe now. Mild chaos, seasoned with drowsy resignation. The bus brakes abruptly, and your seatmate, the one sleeping on your shoulder, rolls off you like a tranquilized bowling ball. He lands on the floor with a soft oof, remains still for a moment, then sits up, nods politely, and goes right back to sleep against the heater vent. You begin to understand the strange, dreamy ecosystem of Philadelphia's transit system. The driver drives. The sleepers sleep. The awake people cling to consciousness like it's an Olympic sport. Everyone else simply hopes the person next to them doesn't collapse with enough momentum to cause property damage. When your stop finally approaches, you stand carefully, slowly, gently, like you're emerging from a nest of hibernating animals. You move toward the door, stepping over 3 unconscious knees and a backpack someone is using as a pillow. As you exit, the driver gives you a nod. Or he blinks. Hard to tell. Either way, you've survived a scepter ride in 2026, and honestly, that alone deserves a medal. Philadelphia has always required creative footwork, but now it's practically an Olympic sport. You weave through bodies frozen mid-scroll, mid-sip, mid-life decision, as if time itself is malfunctioning on the pavement. You whisper apologies to everyone's unconscious form, it's only polite. It doesn't take long for you to realize that the sidewalks of 2026 Philadelphia have turned into a bizarre obstacle course, a kind of urban slalom created by forces beyond human control. People are slumped in positions no anatomy textbook has ever acknowledged, sprawled over stoops like forgotten coats, folded into angles reminiscent of malfunctioning folding chairs, or draped elegantly across bus benches like they're posing for a Renaissance painting titled Saint of Eternal Exhaustion. As you step over a man gently snoring beside a fire hydrant, you notice he's still holding his iced coffee upright. A small miracle of grip strength. The straw vibrates slightly with every snore like a metronome keeping tempo for the street. You tiptoe past him, careful not to disturb his beverage or his dignity. Up ahead, a woman lies flat on her back, laptop bag still strapped to her. Eyes closed but expression serene. Her earbuds are in, and you faintly hear the sound of a true crime podcast whispering from one side. You skirt around her carefully, mentally noting that even unconscious Philadelphians multitask better than you ever have. The sidewalk has become a living museum of frozen moments. A man is mid-sip of his Wawa drink, straw still between his lips as he leans gently against a mailbox. Another stands perfectly upright, eyes open, but absolutely asleep, like someone pressed pause on his entire existence. You wave a hand in front of his face, and he responds by swaying slightly, as if the wind has opinions about his balance. You're learning the slalom technique quickly. Small steps, delicate angles, and an occasional hop when someone has inconveniently passed out across an entire path like a very tired bridge troll. In past years, Philadelphians might have yelled, "Yo, move!" at someone blocking a sidewalk. Now they just whisper, "Sorry, bud," and navigate around them like respectful woodland creatures. A biker slowly tips over in front of you, falling sideways into a trash can with the gentlest thunk imaginable. You pause, waiting for something chaotic to follow, but nothing happens. He stays there, limbs draped peacefully. bike tire spinning in the breeze like a sleepy carnival wheel. A passing dog sniffs him and shrugs. You mirror the dog's energy, confused but accepting. At one point you attempt to pass between two unconscious men who've collapsed in perfect parallel formation, like a pair of human guardrails. You mutter "excuse me" as you step over their outstretched legs, even though neither is capable of hearing or resenting you. Philadelphia manners persist even when consciousness does not. As you continue your careful navigation, a woman with grocery bags stumbles ahead of you. She catches herself, exhales, and nods as if to say, "Not today." You cheer quietly in your heart. She then immediately sits down on a curb and falls asleep upright. The grocery bags slump over beside her like tired, loyal companions. The city soundtrack layers itself around you. Distant sirens, impatient honking, pigeons cooing like tiny disapproving uncles, and the soft rhythmic snores of citizens casually taking pavement naps. Every unconscious body becomes part of the scenery. Unexpected speed bumps in the great marathon of simply trying to exist here. But what surprises you most isn't the chaos, it's the choreography. People step around sleepers with ballet-like grace, adjusting their gait without missing a beat. A man pushing a stroller zigzags around 3 slumped bodies and a fallen electric scooter without breaking eye contact with his phone. A courier hops over a napping man on a stoop with the ease of someone clearing a puddle. You start to feel proud of your developing agility, graceful, even. You've become a sidewalk sommelier, able to anticipate a collapse, predict a snoring direction, and identify the safest place to put your next step, all in one smooth motion. And just when you begin feeling confident, a man suddenly collapses inches from your foot, landing like a tranquilized, fainting goat. You sigh, step over him gently, and keep walking. Welcome to Philadelphia, where even falling down is part of the culture. The scent hits you. Warm pretzels, cold concrete, and that faint clinical smell that whispers, "Someone here definitely bought something from the wrong guy behind the bodega." Your nostrils have never been more confused. It's not that Philadelphia has ever been known for smelling good. The city's natural aroma usually hovers somewhere between cheesesteak steam and whatever mysterious things happen near the Delaware River. But 2026 has added a layer of surreal complexity. Now every inhale feels like an emotional gamble. Do you want courage, curiosity, regret? The air provides all three simultaneously, like a scented candle designed by someone who hates you. You take another cautious breath. Under the bass notes of exhaust and soft pretzel bliss, there's a sharp tang reminiscent of rubbing alcohol left in the sun too long. It tickles the back of your throat in a way that suggests someone nearby may have just collapsed mid-errand. You scan the sidewalk. Sure enough, a man lies neatly beside a bus stop bench, as if he simply decided gravity was more trustworthy than his legs. You step around him gently, inhaling an entirely different section of the city's perfume. This one warm, earthy, slightly humid. You turn and discover the source. A woman asleep face down on a bag of potting soil outside a hardware store. You consider how strangely cozy that looks. She snores softly, releasing tiny dust clouds with each exhale, contributing her own floral notes to the street's olfactory chaos. A breeze blows through, carrying new complexities to your sinuses. Burnt sidewalk pretzel, faint gasoline, wet cardboard, and the lingering ghost of last night's cheesesteak festival. It swirls together into an aroma that is somehow both nostalgic and concerning. Like remembering your childhood kitchen, but only after realizing the oven was on fire. You walk past a row of food trucks, each adding its own signature scent to the cloud. One radiates garlic so intensely that you briefly feel spiritually cleansed. Another emits the greasy warmth of fried dough, which blends beautifully with the cold metal smell of the light poles. The third truck smells like someone tried to make soup from sadness and expired deli meat. You give that one a wide berth. Then there's the unmistakable chemical whisper drifting around certain corners, the one that makes your brain say, maybe hold your breath for this part. It's sharp, sterile, and uncomfortably reminiscent of hospital disinfectant diluted with questionable decisions. You've learned that where this smell appears, a spontaneous sidewalk napper is never far away. Sure enough, you catch sight of two men slumped symmetrically on either side of a newspaper box, like bookends in a very sleepy library. The air around them smells faintly of latex gloves, cheap cologne, and a dusty hint of despair. Philadelphia's new signature blend. Despite the strangeness, the scentscape tells the story of the city better than anything else. Each block has its own aromatic personality. Some smell like bakery heaven. Others smell like construction materials and ambition. Some smell like they're deeply tired. Some smell like they'd prefer you not ask questions. A bus drives past, belching a cloud of diesel that temporarily erases all other smells. You cough, blink, and reassure yourself that your lungs will recover sometime in the next decade. When the fumes lift, a new aroma rises, warm bagels from the corner shop mingling with the crisp morning air. You inhale deeply and feel something rare. Comfort. Then a man collapses a few feet away, landing with a soft thwump, immediately resetting the scent profile. Now the air carries the unmistakable note of somebody dropped their iced coffee, and yes, it is leaking toward your shoe. You step aside just in time. You continue walking, navigating a city that smells like nothing else on earth. Confusing, chaotic, oddly cozy, occasionally alarming, and absolutely alive in the most Philadelphia way possible. And as your nose adjusts to its new reality, you realize the truth. Every block might smell different now, but at least you'll never be bored. You start to realize that entire microeconomies have reshaped themselves around Medetomidine's chaos. Half the block is asleep. The other half is trying to sell you chargers, shoes, or motivational speeches for pocket change. It's capitalism, but remixed by a DJ who keeps falling asleep on the turntable. As you walk down the street, you begin to understand that Philadelphia's informal market has evolved into something between a flea market, a barter economy, and a nap-friendly networking event. Vendors who are still conscious hawk their wares with the urgency of people who know they have approximately 3 minutes before involuntary unconsciousness claims them too. A man waves a phone charger at you. $10, he says boldly, before his eyelids flutter like exhausted butterflies. He manages to stay upright long enough for you to politely decline. He nods, and then continues nodding until he fully tips over, landing gently on a stack of winter coats he was also selling. You take one step closer and see a handwritten sign tucked into the pile that reads, "No refunds if I fall asleep." Reasonable. Next, a woman approaches you holding a single sneaker. Just one. She explains she'll give you the second shoe after you pay, but her voice grows soft, dreamy, and ultimately trails off into a whisper you cannot decipher. She slumps against a mailbox, still clutching the shoe with the dedication of a true professional. You thank her and move on. The motivational speaker is your favourite. He stands on an overturned milk crate, gesturing passionately to no one, shouting, "You can do anything if you..." and then collapses face first into a duffel bag full of inspirational pamphlets. A teenager skateboards by, grabs one pamphlet, reads it and mutters, solid advice before riding off. The currency itself has become fluid. Actual cash works, but so do cigarettes, half-eaten snacks, Uber promo codes, and promises you'll definitely never fulfill. A guy tries to trade you a Bluetooth speaker in exchange for a ride later, or like emotional support tomorrow. You respectfully decline. mostly because the speaker is currently doubling as his pillow. Every few minutes someone wakes up, looks around with mild confusion, and immediately resumes whatever transaction they were attempting before they passed out. It's like watching someone rejoin a Zoom meeting after their Wi-Fi died, but without any apology for technical difficulties. You try to keep track of who is selling what, but it's impossible. Every vendor is operating at a different stage of consciousness. One man is actively asleep, but still has his hand extended in a selling gesture, palm open as if waiting for payment. A woman lies across a blanket of neatly organised items, sunglasses, charging cables, mismatched gloves, and snores softly. Her friend sits beside her, awake and conducting business on her behalf like a very tired CEO. Further down the block, a man has set up a small table with 3 plastic cups turned upside down. "Want to play?" he asks. You assume he means a shell game. He lifts 1 cup to reveal nothing. He shrugs, lifts the 2nd cup, still nothing. He lifts the 3rd cup and immediately falls asleep leaning on his arm. You consider putting $1 under 1 cup just to help him out. Near a bus shelter, a group of older women has formed a cooperative. They knit, sell snacks, trade gossip, and gently turn unconscious pedestrians onto their side so they don't block foot traffic. One of them offers you a homemade granola bar. You ask what's in it. She smiles mysteriously and says, "Enough to keep you awake, sweetie." You buy 2. By now you understand that the city hasn't stopped functioning, it's simply adapted to its most exhausted form. Hustles continue. Deals are made. Goods change hands, sometimes intentionally. It's chaotic, charming, and mildly concerning all at once. You take one last look around at the half-awake entrepreneurs, the unconscious inventory guardians, the whispered negotiations occurring between 2 people who will forget them entirely in 5 minutes. If this is the future of street economics, you think, then the invisible handshake of commerce has officially been replaced by a gentle, unexpected nap. And honestly, it's still more organised than Wall Street. The most powerful person in the city right now, the pharmacist. They stand behind bulletproof glass like oracles guarding the last sane molecules in town. You approach carefully, part pilgrim, part panicked sleepwalker. Inside, the pharmacy feels like a sanctuary built out of fluorescent lights and pure exhaustion. The soft hum of refrigerators creates a soothing backdrop, like white noise for emotionally drained adults. Rows of neatly organised medications sit behind the counter, glowing like holy relics awaiting their moment to save someone's Tuesday. The pharmacist doesn't look at you yet. They're too busy doing the sacred ritual of verifying a pill bottle label with the concentration of someone defusing a bomb. You step closer to the counter, passing a display of vitamins no one trusts anymore, and a bin of discount hand warmers that feels a little too metaphorical. A couple of customers wait ahead of you, each swaying gently like seaweed caught in a mild current. One leans against the counter with their forehead pressed to the glass, leaving a small foggy oval that says, "I simply cannot." The pharmacist finally looks up. Their eyes carry the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose job used to be about flu shots, and now involves fielding existential questions about tranquilizers from people who haven't slept in realistic positions for weeks. They adjust their glasses, take a slow breath, and say the sacred words, "Next." Their voice is soft yet powerful, like a monk calling you toward enlightenment or at least toward the correct aisle for bandages. You step forward reverently. You're not totally sure what you're about to ask for: clarity, protection, a product that prevents you from collapsing into a decorative plant outside the hardware store. You open your mouth, but before you speak, someone behind you slumps to the floor like a puppet whose strings were cut by an unimpressed deity. The pharmacist doesn't react. This is Tuesday. "What can I help you with?" they ask, tone neutral but carrying the subtle energy of someone who has seen too much. You consider your options. Should you request something practical, like caffeine pills, something preventative, like a mask made of dreams and uncut hope, something spiritual, like a blessing over your nervous system? You settle on the most adult thing you can think of. Vitamins. The pharmacist blinks slowly, the way a wise elder might blink when a traveller asks where the sun goes at night. "What kind?" they ask. You panic. You have no idea. You want the kind that makes your legs stay upright and your consciousness remain inside your skull. You want the kind advertised by overly chipper influencers who definitely don't live in Philadelphia. "Just the good ones?" you whisper. The pharmacist nods sagely, as if this is exactly the kind of nonsense they expect from customers these days. They turn, moving with the serene slowness of a monk retrieving scrolls, and pull down a bottle of multivitamins that promises energy, focus, and general life stability. Perfect. While they ring you up, another customer tries to ask a question but falls asleep mid-sentence, sliding gently down the blood pressure machine like a very drowsy snake. Without looking up, the pharmacist presses a button that turns off the machine's beeping. They have mastered the ancient art of multitasking in a city that refuses to remain upright. You take your bag with gratitude so deep it borders on spiritual devotion. "Thank you," you say, and you mean it more than you've meant anything all week. The pharmacist offers you the faintest smile, the kind bestowed only upon those who seem genuinely lost but polite about it. "Stay safe out there," they murmur, in the tone of someone sending you into a battlefield. You step back into the street, holding your vitamins like a relic, like hope, like the city's unofficial protection spell. And as someone collapses into a recycling bin beside you, you realize, in Philadelphia 2026, the pharmacist isn't just a medical professional. They're the closest thing you have to a guardian angel. A man faceplants gently into a recycling bin. Someone shrugs. Someone else pokes him with a cheesesteak wrapper. You stand there wondering if you should help, or if this is just normal Tuesday energy. You hover awkwardly, torn between your instincts as a functioning adult and the collective vibe of Philadelphia 2026, where collapse has become so common that the city reacts to it the way most people react to drops of rain. Mild acknowledgement, then immediate acceptance. The man still hasn't moved, his legs splayed behind him like a marionette whose puppeteer clocked out early. The bin wobbles dangerously, plastic groaning under the weight of this latest nap attempt. A woman walks by, glances down, nods once, and says the city's new unofficial motto, "He'll be fine." She delivers this with such confidence that you almost believe her. Almost. You crouch slightly, squinting at the man for signs of life, movement, breathing, the subtle twitch of someone dreaming about hoagies. You consider calling for help, but before you can reach for your phone, a teenager passes by, lifts one earbud, assesses the scene for approximately half a second and says, "Yeah, that's just Frank. He does that." Then he keeps walking, earbuds back in, unfazed. The casualness is shocking. Back in your pre-2026 life, a collapsing stranger would trigger a crowd, emergency calls, maybe a small neighbourhood trauma bond. Here, it's Tuesday, it's 10 a.m, it's barely worth commentary. Another pedestrian, a middle-aged man holding a dripping iced coffee, stops beside you. "You good?" he asks. You assume he's talking about the face-planted guy. He is not. He is talking to you. He gives the unconscious man a polite glance, shrugs, then continues walking as though he's late for a meeting with a deli counter. You stand frozen, unsure if you should intervene or simply let the city handle its own sleepy ecosystem. After several contemplative seconds, the recycling bin man stirs. His hand twitches. His head lifts slightly, only to fall back into the bin with a soft whoomph and the jingle of empty soda cans. This earns approving nods from two elderly women sitting on a stoop. See, one says, he ain't dead. Reassuring, but not comforting. You start noticing how normal this has become. On the opposite sidewalk, a woman lies half asleep on a stack of pallets. Across the street, a construction worker naps peacefully inside a traffic cone, his legs sticking out like he's been partially teleported into another dimension. And at the bus stop, someone slumps sideways mid-sentence while chatting with a very patient friend. Every few steps, you hear someone ask variations of the same question. Is he okay? He good? You alive, bro? But the tone is never panicked. It's observational, polite, as if checking in on the weather. You keep walking, and soon you witness another collapse. A man on a scooter slowly tipping like a tired domino. This one is more theatrical. His scooter glides into a bush as he sinks to the sidewalk, landing with the gentle resignation of someone who knew this moment was coming. 3 bystanders observe the scene. One gives a thumbs up. Another films it for TikTok. The third rolls him slightly to the side so he's not blocking the curb cutout. Community care. Philadelphia style. Even dogs seem accustomed to this. A golden retriever trots confidently beside its owner, who collapses against a street lamp like a marionette snapped in half. The dog sighs, a deep weary sigh, and lies beside him, resting its head obediently on the man's chest until he wakes up. You're fascinated by the city's collective emotional detachment. In any other place this would prompt panic. Here, it's part of the choreography. A system. A ritual of half-concerned but fully functional citizens who somehow manage to go about their day regardless of gravity's constant victories. Finally, you exhale, realizing you've adapted too. Someone on a bench slumps sideways in your peripheral vision. You glance, assess, and internally deliver the same verdict everyone else seems to arrive at. Yeah, he's probably okay. And with that serene acceptance, you continue on your way, fully assimilated. Congrats. It's officially normal Tuesday energy for you too. You finally sit down with food, only for half the restaurant to slump over mid-bite like synchronized swimmers in slow motion. The server yawns so hard you mentally calculate their collapse angle. It's not the relaxing meal you'd hoped for, but in 2026 Philadelphia, dining out now comes with a side order of existential dread. The restaurant hums with a strange, sleepy energy. Forks pause mid-air, soda fizz fades into the sound of gentle snoring, and somewhere in the back a cook thuds softly onto a bag of onions. Nobody looks up. Your own plate sits before you. A cheesesteak that smells incredible, but feels dangerously heavy in your hands, as if eating it requires a level of concentration usually reserved for bomb defusal. You take a cautious bite. Bliss. Warm, greasy bliss. Then, in your peripheral vision, someone slumps face first into their soup, creating a tiny tidal wave that splashes onto their napkin. Their dining partner sighs, pulls them upright by the hoodie, props their head against a salt shaker, and continues eating. You breathe deeply, savouring the flavours while attempting to ignore the unconscious man gently sliding down the booth next to you, like a melting candle. The scent of grilled onions mingles with the faint, sterile whiff you've come to associate with spontaneous collapses. A strangely familiar aroma now, like Philadelphia's new unofficial seasoning. Across the restaurant, a teenager tries valiantly to keep her eyes open while scrolling on her phone. Her head dips lower and lower until her forehead rests on her plate of fries. She doesn't wake. A server walks by, casually placing a napkin over her like a tiny blanket. Hospitality lives on, in its own way. Your server returns to refill your drink, but you can tell they're seconds from going under. Their eyelids flutter, their knees sway, their tray tilts dangerously. You instinctively hover your hands near the airspace where you believe they will fall. Miraculously, they remain upright, pour your soda with surgical precision, hand you a straw, and then promptly collapse into the booth across from you. You tuck the straw into your drink yourself. It feels like the polite thing to do. The restaurant television plays muted local news footage showing, shockingly, more people falling asleep in public. A chyron reads, "City officials urge calm." While behind the anchor, a man collapses into a ficus. No one in the restaurant reacts. A couple at a nearby table keeps eating, nudging their unconscious companion deeper into the booth to make more space for the ketchup bottle. As you continue your meal, the quiet rhythmic pattern of forks dropping, bodies slumping, and chairs scooting becomes almost soothing. It's like dining inside a slow-moving metronome of human exhaustion. You watch as the kitchen door swings open, and a cook stumbles out with a plate, sets it down at a random table, whispers, "Enjoy," and falls asleep standing up. A passing customer gently rotates him so he's leaning safely against the wall. You decide to enjoy your meal while focusing on staying upright yourself. It becomes a strange kind of mindfulness exercise. Chew slowly, breathe deeply, blink enough times to prove you're conscious, and occasionally check the structural integrity of the people around you. You feel oddly calm, almost proud, as you maintain your posture, while the restaurant transforms into a casual napping arena. By the time you're halfway through your sandwich, an entire family of 4 is fully collapsed at their table, each in a different, oddly graceful position. You admire their form. The dad's head rests perfectly in his mashed potatoes, like a man who embraced fate. The mum leans against the wall, serene as a sleeping saint. One child snores into a grilled cheese. The other still holds a chicken tender in an upright, triumphant grip. You finish your meal quietly, alone among the dreamers. You leave a tip beside your slumbering server's arm, a small offering to the brave, exhausted frontline workers of Philadelphia's new dining scene. And as you step outside, full and miraculously still awake, you realize something comforting. If you can eat lunch here without collapsing into your sandwich, you can survive anything this city throws at you. Philadelphia Pigeons have risen to new levels of authority. They strut with confidence. They judge you. They absolutely know you are new here. One of them escorts a sleeping man away from traffic like a tiny feathery EMT. It's unsettling at first. You've seen pigeons in other cities. They wobble around, steal crumbs, occasionally fly into windows with the grace of a confused potato. But not here. Philadelphia pigeons have adapted to the Medetomidine era with startling professionalism. They look organized, purposeful, like they've unionized. A cluster of them gathers onto the L tracks, standing in a semicircle around a man who has fallen asleep mid-step, one hand still pointing toward a distant pretzel cart. The pigeons nod to one another, make a series of coordinated coos, and somehow work together to nudge him gently toward a safer patch of sidewalk. You stare, amazed, waiting for someone to explain. No one does. A passing pedestrian simply says, "Yeah, they do that now," and keeps walking like nothing is weird. You continue down the block, only to find more pigeons participating in civic duty. One stands guard beside a woman sleeping on a stoop, puffed up importantly, glaring at anyone who walks too close. Another pigeon drags a fallen glove back toward its unconscious owner, dropping it delicately beside their arm before strutting off with the pride of a bird who has fulfilled its moral obligation. Then there's the traffic control pigeon, a particularly plump bird who has decided it alone shall manage the crosswalk. Every time someone begins to slump while crossing the street, the pigeon marches into action, positioning itself directly in front of oncoming cars and staring them down with the unwavering confidence of a manager who knows you haven't submitted your paperwork. Cars stop. Not because of the lights, those haven't worked consistently since January, but because the pigeon wills them to. You marvel at the aura these birds possess. They walk with the swagger of old retired cops who've seen things. Their chests puff out like they've been promoted. If pigeons could wear tiny reflective vests, these ones would. And yet, despite their newfound professionalism, they still judge you harshly, especially when you trip over nothing. A pigeon watches you stumble and gives a disappointed headshake that stings more than any human opinion you've ever received. You find yourself saying, "My bad," to a bird. The bird does not forgive you. Further down the street, you witness a group of pigeons forming what appears to be a meeting. They cluster around a sleeping man sprawled across 2 steps, cooing deeply, nodding in unison. After a moment of consultation, they disperse. One stands lookout, one retrieves a French fry from the gutter, self-care, and one remains perched on the man's foot as if marking him as under pigeon protection. You realise something profound. The birds doing the emotional labour humans no longer can. People keep falling asleep mid-task, mid-thought, mid-cheesesteak. Someone has to maintain order. Somehow that someone is pigeons. You walk past a small park where 3 pigeons are guiding a man who fell asleep on a bench into a more comfortable position, tucking his coat under his head like tiny judgmental hospice nurses. You whisper, "Thank you," instinctively. The pigeons nod. Not graciously, more like they're acknowledging your recognition of their authority. Their competence is eerie and inspiring and also deeply insulting to the human race. Near the end of the block you see one last pigeon, a large regal one, standing atop a fire hydrant like it has been elected mayor. It surveys the street calmly, scanning for new collapse incidents. When someone nearby wobbles, the pigeon lifts 1 foot in warning, ready to intervene. You realise you feel safer knowing it's there. You take a breath, adjust your posture, and continue walking under the watchful gaze of Philadelphia's new guardians. In a strange way, you trust them more than anyone else right now, and honestly, if the pigeons ever decide to run for city office, you're voting for them. You tune into the soundtrack of the city, the soft chorus of unconscious people sleeping upright, scepter brakes screeching out their final prayers, and the distant cry of someone yelling, "You!" for no reason. It's a strange symphony, chaotic, comedic, oddly comforting in its own way. You pause for a moment on the sidewalk just to listen, because the city's audio landscape tells you everything you need to know about life in Philadelphia right now. It's like a meditation app designed by someone who's been awake for 36 hours and has given up pretending everything is fine. The first layer is the snoring. Not gentle, peaceful snoring either. No, Philadelphia offers a rich variety. You hear the soft nasal hum of a man curled under a bus shelter, the deep rumbling snores of someone asleep on a milk crate, the delicate mouse-like wheeze of a teenager who's fallen asleep standing up, forehead against a mural. Each snore is a little different, adding texture to the street like acoustic seasoning. Then come the sirens, always somewhere, always layered in the distance. They don't sound rushed anymore, they sound tired. Like the ambulances themselves have accepted their fate as chauffeurs for citizens involuntarily napping in inconvenient places. One siren winds down the block, slows to a crawl, then abruptly cuts off, replaced by a faint voice shouting, "He's fine, he's breathing," followed by the click of an engine restarting. Even emergency responders have incorporated casualness into their routine. A scepter bus roars past, brakes screaming like they've been through years of emotional turmoil and are begging for retirement. You imagine the brakes sitting in a tiny therapist's office, saying things like, "I can't carry this weight anymore." The whole bus rattles as if arguing with the road about whose fault this commute really is. Above all that, you hear the signature Philadelphia background noise, someone shouting into the void. It's always unclear what they're yelling about. It might be sports, it might be pigeons, it might be their inner demons, but the delivery is passionate, consistent, eternal. Yo! Echoes between buildings like a mating call or a reminder that, yes, this is still Philadelphia. You continue down the block and the soundtrack changes subtly, like walking from one playlist into another. There's a man muttering about lottery numbers, a woman singing off-key but with undeniable confidence, a chorus of aluminum cans clattering as someone collapses into a recycling bin behind you. You turn, you're used to it now. No one is alarmed. Someone says, add it to the album, and keeps walking. At a red light, you stop and notice a new layer. The gentle rhythmic tap of a pigeon pecking at a fallen pretzel. Peck. Pause. Peck. Pause. It's strangely hypnotic, marking time like a metronome set to urban exhaustion. A man slumped beside the pretzel snores in perfect harmony with the pigeon's tempo. Collaboration. A delivery truck pulls up and the driver hops out, leaving the engine idling. It produces a low rumble that vibrates through the sidewalk, mixing with the buzzing streetlights overhead. One of the lights flickers, humming like an old refrigerator with unresolved emotional wounds. The entire city feels alive, breathing, humming, grumbling, snoring, every piece contributing to the score. You pass a playground where the swings creak in the breeze. No children, just a single adult who has fallen asleep sitting upright in the mulch. The swing chains squeal softly, like they're gossiping about the scene. A jogger runs by, panting heavily, until they suddenly stop mid-stride and collapse onto the grass. Their laboured breaths fade into soft snores that blend seamlessly into the rest of the neighbourhood's ambience. In a strange way, all these sounds form a lullaby. Not a gentle one, not melodic or soothing in a traditional sense, but a lullaby of reality, messy, raw, funny in the way life often is when it stops pretending to be polished. You breathe in and listen once more. Snoring, sirens, screeching brakes, random yelling, distant civic disappointment, Philadelphia's 2026 mixtape. And honestly, it slaps harder than you'd like to admit. You witness a woman slump against a fire hydrant with the elegance of a Victorian fainting spell. You quietly rate the form 8.5 out of 10. No points deducted for surprise drooling. You've seen collapses all day, but this one is different. It has theatrics, poise, commitment. The hydrant supports her gently, like an aluminum chaise lounge designed by a city planner who truly believed in public seating, but had a $12 budget. The woman's hand drapes over her lap like she's posing for a Renaissance painting titled Saint of Municipal Infrastructure. It suddenly dawns on you that in Philadelphia 2026, accidental collapse has evolved into something of an art form. Every tumble, slump, and unexpected nap is a mini performance. Some people fall rigidly like they're reenacting a historic statue. Others melt into the sidewalk like butter on a hot grill. A few simply fold at the hips in a motion so smooth you wonder if they once trained in interpretive dance. The city has effectively become a laboratory for human gravitational surrender. As you walk, you begin noticing the variety. There's the classic tree timber, in which someone slowly leans until they topple sideways into whatever surface chooses to catch them. Today, it's usually a trash can, or a vending machine, or you, unfortunately. Then there's the marionette disengage, where arms and legs appear to lose interest simultaneously, leaving the person crumpled into a compact geometric shape, not previously thought possible for adult humans. But the most advanced technique is the controlled slide, a move perfected by locals who've learned to surrender to the ground with as much dignity as possible. They lean back, exhale, and slide down a wall in one smooth glide, like they're starring in a slow-motion skincare commercial about accepting fate gracefully. You pass a man demonstrating this move beautifully. He locks eyes with you as his knees soften, his back meets the brick behind him, and he descends with the controlled smoothness of someone who has fully accepted destiny. When he comes to rest in a sitting position, he gives you a small nod of acknowledgement. You salute him internally. The city itself doesn't make this easy. Philadelphia has never been known for soft surfaces. The sidewalks are uneven, patched with decades of improvisation. The curbs are high and judgmental. The fire hydrants are aggressively shaped. Every fall risks bruising both skin and ego. Yet somehow the people have adapted. You see a woman collapse and instinctively rotate mid-fall to land on a grassy tree pit, nature's tiny, unintentional crash pad. A man collapses forward with his face millimeters from a lamppost, avoiding impact in a last-second miracle that deserves slow claps. A teenager faints backward into a pile of Amazon boxes left out for recycling. Soft landing. Prime delivery. There are also helpers, strangers who, with the reflexes of seasoned stagehands, catch collapsing citizens before they hit the ground. A man grabs a falling woman by the backpack strap, rotates her gently, and props her neatly against a bike rack. "There you go," he says calmly, as if placing a toddler into a stroller. You sense the community spirit. People collapse alone, but they are seldom left alone. Someone always checks for breathing. Someone always adjusts a limp arm so it isn't in the path of a skateboarder. Someone always murmurs, "You're good, buddy," even when the buddy is unconscious in a pothole. At one point you witness a group collapse. 3 friends walking together, laughing, then dropping in synchronized fashion like dominoes rehearsing for a competition. They land in a perfectly spaced line on the grass beside a statue. A tourist worries. A local says, "Nah, that's fine." They do brunch like this. You start to appreciate the unspoken elegance of it all. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's bizarre. But there is strangely a beauty in the way people surrender to gravity while the city keeps moving around them. After watching yet another person slump elegantly onto a bench like a Victorian poet overwhelmed by emotion, you take a deep breath. If collapsing were an Olympic sport, Philadelphia would sweep the podium. You step inside an ER, where doctors sprint, nurses hover like caffeinated angels, and half the waiting room is asleep in identical poses. You try not to catch anyone's falling head. The air is thick with disinfectant, stale coffee, and the quiet chorus of exhausted snoring coming from every corner. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead like they too have been working double shifts for 6 months. A security guard sits by the entrance, wide awake but spiritually unconscious. He gives you a nod that says, "Welcome to the chaos. Please hold your sanity in the upright position." You take a seat between a man asleep on his own shoelaces and a woman who appears to have fallen unconscious mid-Sudoku puzzle, pencil still hovering above the grid. Her numbers are impeccable. Her posture is not. You gently tilt her head so it doesn't collide with your shoulder every time she exhales. Nurses move in quick, efficient bursts, weaving through clusters of unconscious patients like Formula One drivers navigating human traffic cones. They murmur soothing instructions, check vitals, lift limbs, tuck blankets, and reposition heads with the precision of sculptors adjusting clay. Sometimes a nurse simply walks by, places a soft blanket on a slumped individual without even breaking stride, and continues on. It's like watching a flock of guardian angels who all share one collective nervous system powered by caffeine and spite. A doctor bursts through a set of double doors, calling out names that no one responds to because everyone is asleep. He sighs deeply, an exhausted exhale that could probably power a wind turbine. "If anyone hears me," he says, "please just raise a hand." No hands rise. 2 patients snore in harmony. The triage board glows with names and symptoms, though someone has added a sticky note that simply reads, "Try your best." A woman behind the reception desk types steadily, pausing every few minutes to gently nudge a sleeping man whose head keeps slipping off the counter. She looks absolutely unfazed. You imagine her performance review now includes categories like patient head stabilization and maintaining eye contact while someone collapses. Across the room, a man falls asleep while standing leaning against the water fountain. A nurse walks over, places a pillow behind his head, adjusts his posture, and wheels a portable chair under him with ninja-like silence. The man never stirs. It's both impressive and unsettling. You notice every patient here has the same accessory, a warm hospital blanket draped over them like a ceremonial robe. Some clutch them, some drool on them, some are wrapped so tightly they resemble medically supervised burritos. The cart of fresh blankets sits in the corner like a revered artifact. One nurse restocks it with the urgency of someone tending to sacred fire. Every few minutes, someone collapses at the check-in desk. No one panics. A nurse materializes, drags over a rolling blood pressure cart, and fixes the person up with the tenderness of a parent putting a child to bed. Meanwhile, another nurse peels a sleepy man off a vending machine he accidentally slumped into. His forehead left an imprint in the dust. A masterpiece. You try to maintain eye contact with no one, mostly because eye contact seems to be the universal signal for I'm still awake. Please help me. You don't want to give the wrong impression. You cross your legs neatly, sit up straight and blink deliberately like someone auditioning for the role of functional human number 3. A nurse eventually approaches you with a clipboard. Are you here for treatment? She asks. Maybe. Not sure yet, you admit. She nods thoughtfully, as though this is the most normal answer she's heard all day. She hands you a blanket anyway. Hold this, just in case. You accept it reverently, like receiving a gift from a wise elder. It is warm, soft, and heavier than expected, weighted with the responsibility of not falling asleep in public. As another patient drools gently onto the floor beside you, you tighten your grip on the blanket and think, if the ER handed out frequent flyer points, the whole city would be platinum members by now. A cop nudges a sleeping man with the emotional energy of someone who's already done this 43 times today. You can tell they're deeply, profoundly tired. Not regular tired, not I need a coffee tired. No, these officers carry the specific kind of exhaustion you only get from chasing people who aren't actually running, filling out paperwork for incidents that technically count as naps, and repeatedly confirming that everyone is in fact still breathing. Their uniforms sag, their eyelids droop. Their patience hovers at a level best described as spiritually absent. You watch as the officer waits for the man on the sidewalk to stir. When he doesn't, the cop gives him another gentle poke with a baton, not aggressively, more like tapping a stubborn touchscreen that isn't registering. Eventually the man snorts awake, mumbles something about the Eagles, and promptly falls asleep again. The cop sighs the sigh of a person who has accepted that the universe is not taking requests today. Another officer joins in, carrying what appears to be a clipboard of people we found, asleep in questionable places. The list is long, very long. They flip through it like a diner menu, muttering, "Okay, we got hydrant lady, mailbox guy, scooter, sleeper, pretzel, stand trio." You peek over their shoulder and see a sketch of someone asleep inside a shopping cart. It looks accurate. You decide to keep moving, only to encounter another scene of law enforcement gently wrangling unconscious citizens. 2 cops are trying to lift a man who has fallen asleep halfway out of a laundromat dryer. They're working with the delicate precision of surgeons handling radioactive material, muttering to each other in that tired monotone unique to people who have seen too much but are too exhausted to complain. Lift his foot. That's his arm. What? Oh, yeah. Okay, lift it anyway. Nearby, an officer stands guard over a woman who has collapsed artistically across a row of trash cans like a fainting duchess. The cop patiently directs foot traffic around her, waving pedestrians through like an airport marshal guiding planes. He looks like he hasn't blinked since Monday. A police SUV rolls down the street slowly, very slowly. It stops every few feet, not for crime, but because one of the officers hops out to upright someone who fell asleep folded over a parking meter. They adjust the person's coat, pat their shoulder, and climb back in. Their movements are methodical, practiced, and tragically routine. You half expect them to start offering hot cocoa and bedtime stories. One officer sits on a stoop filling out a form titled Involuntary Public Slumber Incident Report. He checks boxes like face-first fall, upright collapse, sideways slide, and gentle fold. His partner hands him a coffee. He drinks it with the dead-eye gratitude of a man who has forgotten what weekends feel like. As you walk past a precinct, you see cops taking naps in their patrol cars, leaning against walls or curled up beside their office dogs, who also look exhausted, which is saying something. The officers wake instantly whenever someone collapses nearby, like guardians responding to the world's sleepiest bat signal. You overhear two of them talking outside. "You ever think about switching careers?" one asks. "To what?" the other replies. "We're basically professional nap shepherds now." You can't argue with that logic. You round a corner and witness a final scene. 3 officers working together to gently lift a snoring man out of a shopping cart and place him on a bench. One adjusts his head, one tucks a jacket under him, one scribbles notes on a clipboard. They do it all silently, efficiently, like a well-trained team of sleep paramedics. When they finish, they step back and evaluate their work. "Looks good," one says quietly. "Yeah," another agrees. "Real good." Then they shuffle off to the next unconscious Philadelphian awaiting their services, and as you watch them disappear into the city's chaos, you realise no one in this town is holding it together, but the police are at least holding everyone upright. It's cold, and sleeping people generate warmth. Philadelphia has become a city of accidental human space heaters. You consider your options and choose dignity. Barely. The wind slices through the streets like it has unresolved anger issues. Even your thickest coat feels more symbolic than functional. You pull it tighter around yourself, glaring at the breeze as if personal resentment can generate thermal energy. It cannot. Meanwhile, the unconscious man beside you is radiating a gentle warmth that your shivering body absolutely notices. You take a small step closer, just to feel the temperature difference, just to assess the viability. He's cozy, radiating heat like a forgotten bowl of soup that's somehow still warm an hour later. The temptation is immediate and powerful. You remind yourself you're a civilized adult with boundaries. Then another gust of icy wind slaps you across the face and whispers, "Are you though?" You discreetly inch closer. Around you, the city has fully embraced unintentional communal heating. Everywhere you look, people are huddled near unconscious strangers the way campers flock to a fire. 2 women sit pressed back to back with a man sleeping upright on a bus stop bench, forming a strange but functional heating triangle. A teenager leans against a slumped delivery driver like they share a soul. A businessman has strategically positioned himself near a cluster of sleepers arranged like a human radiator. It's not weird anymore, it's just meteorology. You continue your walk, trying desperately to preserve what little body heat you have left. Your breath fogs in the air like a tiny spectre leaving your mouth. You pass a woman asleep on a staircase, curled into herself like a cat. 3 people have formed a semicircle around her, rubbing their hands and chatting casually as though she's a bonfire that occasionally snores. A man collapses gently onto the sidewalk ahead of you. Within 30 seconds, 2 strangers shuffle over, positioning themselves around him at strategic angles like they're setting up a campsite. One even whispers, "Thank God he looks warm." You move on, hugging yourself for warmth and dignity, Two things you feel slipping simultaneously. As you turn the corner, you spot perhaps the most desperate heating strategy yet. A group of commuters gathered around a fallen bicyclist whose body heat is so substantial that steam is visibly rising off his jacket. They hold their hands toward him like he's a pot of simmering stew. He snores loudly, undisturbed, as though he has accepted his new role in the social ecosystem. Inside a cafe, people press against the windows not to look outside, but to absorb heat from the unconscious customer face planted on the radiator. Even the barista stands close enough to benefit from the warmth. They whisper prayers of gratitude between espresso pulls. The cold deepens, and you begin to understand that warmth, any warmth, is a treasure. You pass another sleeper curled beneath a mural of Benjamin Franklin. A family stands nearby with spaced-out politeness, their palms tilted toward the man's radiating heat. The dad whispers, "He's like a little furnace," while adjusting his daughter's scarf. Finally, you find yourself at a bus stop where a neatly dressed woman has fallen asleep slumped against the shelter wall. She emits the kind of slow, consistent warmth normally reserved for heating pads and cats. There's space beside her. The wind howls, your bones shiver. You tell yourself you're just going to sit, not lean, not absorb, just sit. You sit, and immediately lean, just slightly, barely noticeable to the untrained eye, like a polite gravitational accident. The warmth is exquisite. Your shoulders relax, your spine thaws, your soul briefly returns from its winter vacation. The woman does not stir, the city does not judge. The wind continues its emotional tirade. You remain close enough to benefit, but far enough to pretend you have boundaries. After a few minutes, guilt taps lightly on your conscience. You straighten your posture and scoot half an inch away, reclaiming the last threads of dignity you possess. You exhale, warmed at last, and think, in Philadelphia 2026, survival isn't about pride. It's about strategic proximity to unconscious strangers. Everyone has a theory. Aliens, the government, Wawa, the Eagle's defensive line. You overhear 3 separate conspiracies before finishing a single pretzel, and these aren't whispered in dark corners or tucked into obscure blogs. No, these theories are shouted across sidewalks, recorded in shaky TikToks, printed on handmade flyers taped to telephone poles, and occasionally painted on abandoned washing machines left outside apartment buildings. Philadelphia 2026 is a breeding ground for confusion, creativity, and a level of speculation that makes ancient mythology look like calm, reasonable reporting. As you chew your pretzel, warm, salty, the one stable thing left in your life, you pass a group of teenagers huddled around a phone. "Bro, I'm telling you," one says, pointing at nothing in particular. "The government put Medetomidine in the rain." His friend gasps, checking the sky as if it might personally wrong him. A third teen nods gravely and says, "That explains why my hair's been weird." They all agree instantly. Scientific consensus, Philadelphia style. A few steps later, you encounter a man preaching from atop a milk crate. His sign reads, "Wake up, unless you're already down." He sees you approach and launches into his pitch. "Medetomidine came from aliens," he declares. "Dropped it right into the supply chain to see how we handle gravity." He gestures dramatically and immediately falls off the crate mid-sentence, landing on his side with a soft thud. A crowd gathers, not to panic but to debate whether aliens pushed him. Your walk continues through a minefield of whispered half-truths and bold nonsense. A woman at a bus stop tells her friend, "I heard Wawa invented it by accident while trying to make a stronger energy drink." The friend gasps. "That tracks," she says, nodding like a scientist verifying lab results. "My cousin works there. He hasn't slept since December." They fall silent as someone nearby collapses next to a trash can. "See?" the woman whispers. "Evidence." Two middle-aged men argue on a corner, gesturing wildly. One claims the Eagles' defensive line has been secretly testing prototype tranquilizers to improve game day stamina. The other insists Medetomidine started as a new kind of CBD gummy manufactured in a basement in South Jersey. Both pause mid-argument to step over a man asleep across the sidewalk, like he's a decorative speed bump. Further down the street, you overhear a pair of elderly women discussing the situation like analysts on a morning news show. "It's the city," one insists. "They're putting something in the tap water." The other shakes her head. "No, it's Pigeons. They're organising." Mark my words. Given what you've witnessed from the Pigeons, you don't dismiss her theory. Then there are the TikToks. Dozens of people recording dramatic low-angle videos claiming they've uncovered the truth. You pass one influencer lying on her stomach outside a convenience store, speaking urgently into her phone. "Guys, listen," she whispers. "Medetomidine isn't a drug, it's a frequency." Behind her, a man collapses into a shopping cart. She gestures to him without missing a beat. That's resonance. Another influencer sits cross-legged near a fire hydrant, explaining to her followers how medetomidine is activated by vibes. You resist the urge to ask what vibrations might be responsible for knocking out half the city. She's already moved on to selling bracelets that block the frequency. A man asleep beside her snores loudly. She holds up a bracelet and says, "See? It's working." But the most Philadelphia conspiracy of all unfolds outside a deli. 3 men debate whether medetomidine is actually a blessing. The city's been loud for decades, one argues. Maybe this is Mother Nature telling us to calm down. Another shakes his head. "Nah bro, it's Comcast, that ends the conversation." Everyone agrees that if any entity had the power to destabilize a city, it would be Comcast. Once you finish your pretzel, you realize something. None of these theories matter. No one is closer to understanding the truth. Everyone is just trying to make sense of the absurd, like humans have done since we first stared at the sky and wondered which god was throwing lightning. In 2026 Philadelphia, uncertainty is the only certainty, and the theories, they're the city's way of staying awake, well metaphorically. Meteorologists now include an unconscious density index which feels uncomfortably accurate. You leave the house prepared for both snow and falling bodies. The local weather report has become a performance art piece. Gone are the days of simple forecasts about rain or sunshine. Now the meteorologist stands before a digital map covered in little icons of people fainting beside various landmarks. "Expect light flurries in the afternoon," she says cheerfully, with moderate winds and a high likelihood of collapses near the CVS on Broad Street, due to wind chill meeting peak drowsiness conditions. She taps a button and the map animates a cluster of cartoon bodies toppling like lazy dominoes. The general public nods. It all checks out. As you step outside, the cold hits you instantly. The kind that stings your nose and reminds you that you're a delicate creature living in a world not designed for comfort. The sidewalk glistens with patches of ice that could easily double as slip and slides. That alone is dangerous, but combined with the city-wide collapse epidemic, it's a hazard course with emotional consequences. You pull your scarf tighter and walk defensively, knees bent slightly, centre of gravity low, because you've learned that falling bodies can appear from anywhere. They might topple from bus stops. They might slide out of doorways. They might gently descend like snowflakes who've given up halfway down. You cannot predict it. No app can warn you. You must stay vigilant. As you pass a row of brownstones, you hear a soft thud behind you. You turn. A man has collapsed in a dramatic swoon against a recycling bin, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. You approach cautiously. He snores, loudly. He is, by all measurable metrics, fine. You mentally log him as stable and continue your route. You reach the corner of 12th and Pine just as a gust of wind rushes through, sending a flock of pigeons spiralling upward and a pedestrian downward. She crumples gently into a snowbank, cushioning her fall. You admire her technique. Very graceful. She'll be warm too, nature's weighted blanket. A couple walks ahead of you, each carrying a steaming Wawa coffee. The wind kicks up again. The man's scarf flaps dramatically, wrapping partially around his face. His steps slow. His girlfriend glances over, rolls her eyes, and braces herself. He slumps into her like a sleepy toddler demanding to be carried. She sighs and drags him to a nearby stoop, covering him with her coat before continuing on her commute. The relationship dynamic is advanced. Further along, a crossing guard stands firm against the freezing air, waving children across the street while occasionally nudging unconscious adults out of crosswalks with her boot. Not kicking, nudging, professionally. She takes a sip of hot chocolate between gestures. You salute her silently. She salutes back, or waves, hard to tell with the mittens. At the CVS itself, the weather report proves prophetic. The entrance is a gathering point of gently collapsed bodies, each arranged as if posing for a Renaissance painting titled "The Temporarily Unconscious at Dawn." A store employee stands outside with a broom, not to sweep them away, but to gently adjust their positions so the automatic doors can open fully. You step inside the CVS, the blast of warm indoor air a gift from the gods. A customer collapses against a shelf of discounted Valentine's candy. A cashier pushes a bottle of water toward him like an offering. You pick up the items you need, chapstick, tissues, one emergency snack, and head back out into the cold. The wind is harsher now, the sky dimmer, the air sharper on your skin. You wrap your coat tighter and remind yourself you must navigate both icy patches and sudden horizontal humans. A car honks, someone yells, "You!" and somewhere behind you, another soft thud announces the weather's latest victim. You keep walking, determined not to become a statistic on tomorrow's unconscious density map. Though, honestly, with a 70 chance of collapse, you're already beating the odds. You reach for eggs at the same moment someone else falls asleep on the shelf beside you. You whisper a comforting "my bad" and continue browsing. You didn't mean to interrupt their collapsed schedule. If anything, you admire the efficiency. One moment they were debating between organic and generic brands, and the next they slid sideways like a marionette who heard the call of the void. Their arm dangles delicately between the dairy cartons, fingers grazing a tub of Greek yogurt like they were making a final negotiation before sleep claimed them. You check the eggs in your hand. One cracked. You place it back, gently, like setting down a sleeping baby, and move on. Grocery stores, you realize, have become strange sanctuaries. The heaters blast, the lighting hums in a soothing, migraine-friendly glow, and the aisles are wide enough to accommodate both carts and unconscious shoppers sprawled artistically across the tile. It feels less like a store and more like a hybrid between a library and a nap-friendly co-working space. You push your cart forward, turning the corner into produce, where at least 4 people are slumped over like wilted celery. A man sleeps face down on a mound of potatoes, his breath fogging up the display glass. Another rests against the banana stand, head tilted in a way that should not be anatomically possible. Someone has used a pile of onions as a makeshift pillow. You admire their bravery. Employees move around them with the practiced grace of dancers who already know the choreography. A worker stocking apples steps over a collapsed customer without breaking rhythm, tossing you a polite, "Watch your step," as if you've just entered a construction zone. You approach the avocados cautiously. 2 women stand nearby debating their ripeness, except one is fully asleep, her finger still pressing gently into the fruit as if testing firmness in her dreams. The other woman continues talking as though her friend is merely deep in thought. "This one's too hard," she says. "This one's perfect. This one's basically guacamole already. Wake up, Marcy." Marcy does not wake up. You continue to frozen foods, where the cold air blasts your face and reminds you how fragile your alertness truly is. Frosty glass doors are smudged from all the heads that have recently rested against them. Someone is asleep inside the freezer section. Inside. A bag of peas has slipped from their grasp and now sits upright against their cheek like a supportive little friend. You make a mental note not to buy those peas. Halfway down the aisle, a toddler sits wide awake in a cart while their parents sleep on both sides of the handlebar like overworked bookends. The toddler munches a snack, unbothered. You give them a sympathetic nod. They nod back, the two of you sharing a silent pact of mutual survival. Next up, the bread aisle. A cluster of people slumps against the shelves in what looks like a group nap, straight out of a cozy cult recruitment brochure. A man snores into a loaf of brioche. Someone drools into a bag of hamburger buns. You select a loaf from the top shelf, the only area free of unconscious influence. You head toward checkout, navigating a slalom course of carts abandoned mid-aisle. One cart contains a single item, cough syrup. Another has 47 cans of tuna stacked with architectural precision, its owner snoring lightly against the adjacent Slim Jims. At self-checkout, 3 machines are occupied by people who fell asleep scanning their items. One woman rests her forehead against the screen, frozen mid-transaction. You gently tap the machine next to her. It wakes up with more enthusiasm than she does. As you bag your groceries, a manager walks by and announces, "If anyone needs help waking someone up, please press the call button." You glance around. No one moves. Half the store is gently snoring. You step outside into the cold, groceries in hand, proud of your accomplishment. Shopping in Philadelphia used to be stressful. Now, it's relaxing, as long as you don't trip over the customers. You notice the walk, the slow, melting gait of people drifting off while trying to reach their destination. You begin to adopt it yourself for blending purposes. It's a strange posture, shoulders slightly sloped, knees operating on a soft, barely functional hinge, arms swinging with the lazy rhythm of someone who's only 70, sure their limbs still belong to them. It's not quite a limp, not quite a glide, more like a controlled collapse performed at 0.5 speed, a human version of low battery mode. Around you, the city moves in this surreal choreography. A businessman drifts past you, briefcase dangling loosely, his steps wobbling like he's traversing a ship deck in rough seas. A woman in a puffy winter coat shuffles forward with the momentum of a shopping cart missing one wheel. A teenager in headphones walks a perfect zigzag pattern as though the sidewalk is giving them GPS instructions only they can hear. You adjust your pace accordingly. Too fast and you stand out. Too steady and people assume you're a tourist. The goal is to appear conscious, but not too conscious, alert enough to avoid stepping on sleeping strangers, but relaxed enough to suggest that, yes, you too could fold to the sidewalk like a collapsing card table at any moment. The shuffle is practical, efficient, a survival tactic. You test it out. A gentle sway, a slight dip in your knees, your head tilting every few steps as if you're reconsidering whether staying awake is worth the effort. To your surprise, it feels natural, almost soothing. Your muscles loosen. Your brain slows to a pleasant hum. Gravity stops feeling like an adversary and starts feeling like an enthusiastic collaborator. As you walk, you spot advanced practitioners of the Medetomidine shuffle. One man executes a half-shuffle, half-lunge maneuver that brings him directly from walking to napping in under 2 seconds, zero transition time. Just step, step, flop, incredible form. A woman navigates a curb by gently rolling onto it like a sleepy sea lion returning to shore. Someone else attempts the stairs but gives up halfway. choosing instead to sleep diagonally across them like an overworked Greek statue. You pass them quietly, honouring their commitment. A group ahead of you performs a synchronised version of the shuffle, their feet scuffing the pavement in near-uniform rhythm. They look like a line of employees leaving a mandatory Zoom meeting that ran 40 minutes too long. Their heads bob, dipping in and out of micronaps so quickly you wonder if they're blinking or briefly astral projecting. One man veers close to you, very close. His shuffle becomes a slow spiral until he completes a perfect 360-degree turn and continues forward as if nothing happened. A bystander claps softly. You consider clapping too. You start noticing patterns, scientific observations, really. The shuffle speed decreases in colder weather. It becomes more dramatic near food carts. It grows wobbly on uneven sidewalks, and near bus stops it transforms entirely into a full-body sway, as though the mere concept of public transit is too emotional for people to handle while upright. The shuffle even changes soundtracks depending on the neighbourhood. In the business district, it's accompanied by the soft clack of dress shoes losing the will to live. Near colleges, it pairs with the dull thud of backpacks hitting the ground as students surrender mid-stride. Outside nightclubs, it blends seamlessly with EDM bass drops, making it hard to tell who's intoxicated and who's Philadelphia 2026 tired. As you continue perfecting your own version of the shuffle, you begin to appreciate its elegance. It allows you to blend into the environment. It prevents sudden falls. It sends a universal message. I too am battling forces beyond my control, but I'm doing so quietly and with minimal resistance. By the time you reach your destination, you've mastered it. You drift to a stop with the fluidity of a sleep-deprived wizard, your knees bending just enough to look relaxed, but not enough to hit the pavement. A nearby man nods at your form, a nod of respect, of acceptance, of communal exhaustion. You nod back, proud. In a city where consciousness is temporary and sidewalks are pillows, the Medetomidine shuffle isn't just a walk, it's a lifestyle. Philadelphia used to pride itself on grit. Now the grit includes a gentle napping culture. You admire a man asleep on a traffic cone. Iconic form. He's balanced perfectly too, a feat of engineering and bodily surrender you didn't know was possible. His coat drapes around the cone like a cape. His hands rest serenely in his lap. His head tilts to the side as though he's posing for a Renaissance painting titled The Patron Saint of Municipal Safety Equipment. You nod respectfully. Philadelphia has always produced innovators. As you continue walking, you begin to notice how normal the napping has become. The city that once bragged about being tough, tireless, and fueled by caffeine and spite has become a patchwork quilt of unconscious bodies. A man lies peacefully across a park bench, using his puffer jacket as a pillow. A woman sleeps standing up against a lamppost, arms draped over it like she's slow dancing with public infrastructure. Two teenagers nap back to back outside a pizza shop, unaware that they've created a perfect 90-degree angle of friendship. You stop at a crosswalk and survey the scene. On one corner, a man sleeps beneath the awning of a deli, curled like a cat in a sunbeam, even though there is no sunbeam. On the opposite corner, a construction worker has folded himself gently into a pile of sandbags, helmet still on, like he understood the assignment and prepared for landing. A cyclist leans against their bike, fully unconscious, one foot still on the pedal. You start to realise something profound. Philadelphia hasn't become less gritty. It's become gritty and sleepy. A strange combination, and honestly, it kind of works. The city once known for late-night diners, 3 a.m., hoagie runs, and people yelling into the void for fun now gives off a different kind of energy. The soft, ambient hum of a population constantly drifting in and out of consciousness. Philadelphia didn't lose its identity. It just added a new one, America's coziest crisis. You walk past a mural depicting historical figures, only to find a man curled at Benjamin Franklin's painted feet like a loyal pet. Franklin, ever serene, seems unbothered. He would probably applaud the efficient use of vertical space. You tiptoe past so as not to disturb either the founding father or his drowsy admirer. At a bus stop, half the riders are asleep in identical poses, heads back, mouths open, legs sprawled in various displays of structural failure. The bus pulls up. The door opens with a hiss. No one moves. The driver sighs, steps out, claps loudly twice like a kindergarten teacher ending recess, and everyone jolts upright in perfect unison. They board the bus single file, like sleepy zombies responding to a deeply internalized scepter instinct. You find your way into a small plaza where a public art installation has become an accidental sleeping pod. People are draped over it like melted candle wax. One man has fallen asleep across 2 benches, starfish style, claiming more real estate than any human reasonably needs. You admire his ambition. A passing jogger slows, then collapses onto a grassy patch so softly it looks rehearsed. You wait a moment. He snores. You continue. The most surreal part is how no one seems bothered by any of this. Locals step around sleepers with elegance and professionalism. It's choreographed kindness. Someone gently tucks a scarf around a stranger before heading into a pharmacy. A teen props a man's head on his backpack before skating away. A dog lies down next to its unconscious owner, sighing sympathetically. Philadelphia, in its own stubborn, chaotic way, has formed a community ritual around collapse. And now, walking through the city's new rhythm, a rhythm of naps and near naps and practiced interventions, you feel yourself adjusting too. The noise softens. The world slows. The sight of people napping everywhere becomes strangely comforting. Like the whole city decided to take a collective mental health day. You look once more at the man on the traffic cone, still perfectly balanced, snoring proudly into the winter air. If this is the new Philadelphia, it's weird, it's cozy, and honestly it fits. You attempt to leave the city. The minute you cross Broad Street, your legs wobble. Fear sets in. You cling to a mailbox whispering, "Not today." It's unclear whether this is psychological, atmospheric, or just Philadelphia itself refusing to let you go like an overprotective sitcom parent. The wind whips around you, cold enough to bully your bones. Your knees soften again, and for a terrifying second you think you might slump to the ground like everyone else. Another statistic, another gently snoring landmark. You steady yourself, cheeks pressed against the mailbox like you're slow dancing with public infrastructure. The mailbox, surprisingly warm, feels like it's seen many citizens negotiate their personal battles here. There's a small dent exactly at head level, likely caused by someone who fainted face first last week. You whisper a quiet apology to it for adding emotional labour to its job description. You take a deep breath and force your legs into motion. They protest immediately, wobbling like cooked spaghetti in jeans. You try to walk in a straight line, but your path curves slightly, as if gravity has developed opinions about your destination. A man across the street slumps against a parking meter, watching you with the glazed expression of someone who has accepted collapse as a lifestyle. He gives you a weak thumbs up, then slides all the way to the sidewalk. Not inspiring. You reach the corner and pause to reassess your life choices. Cars pass by slowly, very slowly, because drivers keep falling half asleep behind the wheel and jerking awake only long enough to hit the turn signal by accident. One car drifts to the curb and stops moving entirely. The driver is asleep, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, occasionally honking with each exhale. Pedestrians walk around him like he's a piece of avant-garde street art. You steel yourself and continue east toward the bridge. The plan is simple. Get to the highway without fainting. The execution? Less simple. You're about 10 steps in when dizziness hits again. You crouch, pretending to tie your shoe even though your shoe is already tied. A helpful passerby pauses, blinks slowly, and collapses beside you. He lands gently, like a felled tree that understood the assignment. You pat him on the shoulder. Rest well, King. Crossing the next block becomes a tactical endeavour. You keep to the edges of buildings so you can catch yourself if needed. You walk slower, adopting the Medetomidine shuffle you've spent all day observing. Loose joints, low expectations. A man stumbles beside you, teeters, then falls backward into a shrub. The shrub trembles under the impact. You salute him. He does not respond. You finally reach the bus stop where the Route 47 should take you closer to the city limits, your hypothetical exit route. But of course, half the bus riders are slumped over like marionettes whose puppeteer took a lunch break. The driver's awake, but only in the technical sense. His eyes blink at the speed of a screensaver. You decide the risk is too high. This bus may start moving, or it may simply become a stationary group nap. You continue on foot. The cold intensifies the farther you get from the city centre, as if Philadelphia itself is trying to chill you back into compliance. Your legs grow heavy, your eyelids heavier still. You fight it, you repeat affirmations. I will not collapse behind a Rite Aid. I will not collapse behind a Rite Aid. But then, a final obstacle, a soft gust of wind, a faint siren. The distant cry of echoing from somewhere near the stadiums, all quintessential Philadelphia noises. They wrap around you like a lullaby. Your knees buckle. You grab a street sign with both hands, clinging to consciousness like it owes you money. Not today, not yet, not like this, not. You straighten yourself, panting, trembling, and laugh quietly at the absurdity. You, a grown adult, fighting sleep like a toddler refusing nap time. And you realize escaping Philadelphia isn't just a physical challenge. It's emotional warfare. Conversations now include pauses for spontaneous unconsciousness. You get used to finishing people's thoughts like a polite psychic. It's become one of the city's defining features, dialogue that suddenly turns into monologue without warning. You'll be talking to someone, maybe a neighbour, maybe a barista, maybe a stranger who really wants to explain their stance on hoagie taxation, and right as they're building toward an important point, their voice slows, their eyes flutter, and gravity politely takes over, and you're left standing there, nodding thoughtfully, as if the sentence didn't end with their forehead resting on their own shoelaces. You try to be respectful. You really do. But after the 10th time this happens in a single morning, you start auto-completing everyone's thoughts out of pure survival instinct. A man begins to say, "The thing about the SEPTA budget is," and collapses onto a parking meter before finishing. You gently pat his back and respond, "Is that it was doomed from the start. I agree completely. You're not always correct in your guesses, but no one wakes up offended. They just blink, resume their sentence like nothing happened, or change topics entirely because they forgot what life was right before the nap. You adapt. Flexibility is key." In one conversation, a woman beside you in line at Wawa begins venting about her ex, and then he said, "Slump." You lean her gently against a shelf of paper towels and whisper, "Something disappointing and emotionally immature." She snores. You add softly, "You deserve better." People in line nod in agreement. You've also learned not to expect closure. Conversations now come in fragments, like you're piecing together a story from a deck of shuffled index cards. A construction worker starts a story about a raccoon, falls asleep mid-anecdote, wakes up 5 minutes later, and continues with zero acknowledgement. You follow along bravely. Then there's texting, one of the few communication methods that should theoretically remain safe. Except now people fall asleep mid-text. You receive messages like, did you hear about the guy who... Have you ever considered moving to... We need to talk. You stare at your phone, wondering if they're okay, then look outside your window and see them asleep on your stoop. Ah, mystery solved. In person, the pauses become predictable. Your brain develops an internal countdown. You'll notice the signs, the slow blink, the drooping chin, the faint wobble of the knees, and then boom. Another unconscious conversational partner. You wait patiently, a minute, 2 minutes, 3. They come to, mid-sentence, completely unaware anything unusual happened. So anyway, they say, brushing gravel off their cheek as I was saying, you pick up the thread like a seasoned improv actor. At one point, you try discussing weekend plans with a friend. He says, we should check out that new Po place. I heard the broth is collapse. 3 minutes later, he snorts awake. Incredible. You applaud his commitment to finishing the thought. Even arguments are affected. You start to have a disagreement with someone over street parking, but right as they raise their voice, their chin drops to their chest and they slump sideways against a mailbox. You stand there awkwardly, unsure whether you've won the argument or if you should wait for round 2. When they wake up, they sigh and say, yeah, you're probably right, purely because they've forgotten what the argument was about. Blessings in disguise, and the heartfelt conversations, strange but tender. A man tries to tell you how grateful he is for his family, his voice warm and soft, then plops gently into your lap like an affectionate golden retriever. You reposition him onto a nearby bench. When he wakes, he finishes the sentence with tears in his eyes. You pretend not to have seen any drooling. Communication has always been complicated. But 2026 Philadelphia adds a new dimension. Patience, improvisation, and the emotional stamina to talk to someone who may or may not be fully conscious at any given moment. But honestly, you've become so good at finishing other people's sentences, you're starting to wonder if this is your new superpower. Everyone dresses in layers now, primarily for warmth, but also for cushioning when gravity inevitably wins. Fashion is functional and fainting friendly. What used to be a simple morning ritual, throwing on a hoodie and heading out, has become strategic armor preparation. You stand in front of your mirror layering fleece over flannel over thermal, trying to calculate which combination will protect your elbows, cushion your spine, and still allow enough mobility to run from the occasional rogue shopping cart. Getting dressed feels like prepping for a low-budget Winter Olympics where all the events end in unexpected naps. When you step outside, you realize Philadelphia has become its own fashion runway. Everywhere you look, people show off the latest in collapse-conscious couture. Puffy jackets are out of stock citywide, snapped up by citizens who want to bounce instead of bruise. Hoodies are thicker, fluffier, and engineered to double as emergency pillows. Scarves aren't worn for style anymore, they're worn so your chin lands on something soft when you faceplant for 8 unscheduled minutes. A man passes you in a parka so large it has its own gravitational pull. He looks like he's about to summit Everest, not walk to Rite Aid. As he moves, the coat rustles like it's filled with crumpled paper, a feature designed to soften falls. Innovative, sustainable, loud. You walk a little farther and spot a woman wearing 2 blankets draped over her shoulders like a regal cloak. One is fleece, one is electric. She plugs herself into a portable power bank as she strolls, warming her layers to a toasty, nap-optimized temperature. You admire her forethought and the fact that she can collapse anywhere and be immediately snug. Then you see the teens, always the trendsetters. They've invented a style called slump chic. Oversized sweatpants, hoodies big enough to disappear inside. Fingerless gloves for aesthetic, not practicality. Everyone looks like they're 2 minutes away from starring in a music video or fainting behind a wah-wah. They drift down the street with the melancholic swagger of poets who've discovered gravity on an emotional level. Kids have adapted too. You spot a toddler in a padded snowsuit so thick they bounce like a rubber ball when they fall over, giggling the whole time. Their parents clap proudly, as if this is exactly what the snowsuit was designed for. Which, honestly, it kind of is now. Even pets have joined the trend. Dogs trot around in miniature puffer jackets with reinforced sides so they can nap dramatically against curbs without bruising. One dog wears a tiny cape that says Certified Collapse Buddy. You consider ordering one for yourself. As for accessories, hats have made a comeback. Not stylish hats, but headgear designed to protect you from concrete, lampposts, and your own questionable balance. Beanies with built-in padding, caps with ear flaps that double as cheek cushions. One man wears a helmet covered in stickers that read things like "I love naps" and "gravity wins." The shoes are perhaps the most fascinating evolution. Thick soles, soft insoles, shock absorption so powerful you could fall down a full flight of stairs and emerge slightly annoyed but physically intact. Philadelphia sneaker culture now prioritizes bounce over brand. You witness a group of college students showing off their custom collapsible fashion. Jackets that inflate slightly upon impact, turning accidental naps into cozy resting sessions. One kid demonstrates by leaning backward dramatically until he flops onto the sidewalk. His jacket puffs up like a marshmallow. Everyone cheers. The city has adapted and so have you. Your outfit today includes 2 hoodies, thermal leggings, and a flannel you don't even like, but it's thick, cushioning, and collapse-approved. You glide through the streets with the confidence of someone who knows they can fall at any moment and still look reasonably composed. And as you watch another pedestrian slump gracefully into a padded coat, with all the elegance of a fainting goat wrapped in a quilt, you smile. Philly may be falling apart, but at least it's doing it in style. As darkness settles, the streets go quiet. People slump in doorways, on stoops, on each other. You inhale deeply. Strangely peacefully, you realize you're finally blending in. It's a different city after sunset. The chaos of daytime, cars honking, people collapsing, pigeons supervising, softens into something almost serene. Streetlights flicker on, casting a warm glow over the slumbering figures draped across the sidewalks like human decor. Even the cold seems gentler at night, the kind that makes your cheeks rosy instead of threatening your survival. You walk slowly, taking in the stillness. Someone snores softly on a stoop, their head nestled against a rolled-up jacket. A couple leans against each other near a mural, both asleep, both breathing in perfect unison, like an adorable but medically concerning screensaver. A man wrapped in a giant hoodie sleeps upright against a parking sign, giving the impression he's been waiting for a tow truck since 1998. Above, windows glow from within. You catch glimpses of people asleep on couches, on beanbags, on yoga mats, on countertops. Philadelphians have become creative. A teenager naps on top of a dresser, legs dangling like a sleepy puppet. A cat curls beside them, glaring at you like this is fine, this is normal, move along. As you pass an alleyway, you hear a faint rustle. A group of friends has collapsed mid-conversation, frozen in positions reminiscent of a Renaissance painting titled The Last Group Chat. One is slumped over a pizza box. Another lies across a folding chair like they attempted to trustful with gravity. You gently close their dropped water bottle to prevent spills. They won't notice, but you feel like a hero. The wind carries the distant hum of a city settling in. Sirens have slowed, traffic quiets. Even the usual, "Yeah." Philadelphia's eternal nocturnal call fades into a half-hearted murmur before drifting off to sleep. You hear the faint ringing of a trolley bell somewhere far away, a lonely, mechanical lullaby. You walk past a small playground illuminated by a flickering lamp. Several adults nap on the swings, drooping forward in gentle arcs. One lies face down in the mulch, arms sprawled like they fell from a low emotional height. You consider waking them, but the rhythmic snoring suggests they're having an excellent dream. Up ahead, an elderly man sits on a stoop with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He is awake, barely, and sipping tea from a travel mug. When he sees you, he nods in the universal gesture meaning, "You made it through another day, kid." You nod back, an unspoken agreement passing between you two. There is strength in simply staying upright. Then, unexpectedly, you feel the fatigue hit you. Not aggressively, not like a sudden collapse, just a soft wave of exhaustion that makes the world feel warm at the edges. You sit down on a low stone wall, inhaling the crisp night air. It smells faintly of pretzel salt and cold asphalt, and something vaguely medicinal that has now become, strangely, comforting. Around you, the city moves in its sleep. A man on a bench adjusts his position without waking. A woman murmurs into her scarf. A pigeon hops closer, checking to see if you're asleep yet. Part guard, part gossip, part night shift supervisor. Your body sinks deeper into the wall. Your breathing slows. For once today, you aren't fighting gravity. You let the stillness wrap around you like a weighted blanket. The quiet of a city that has surrendered to exhaustion feels peaceful, honest, soft. You close your eyes, not fully, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement that rest is contagious here. Even the streetlights seem to dim in solidarity. As you listen to the gentle chorus of snores echoing through the neighborhood, you realize something. Philadelphia hasn't become the city that never sleeps. It's become the city that sleeps whenever it wants, and tonight it wants to sleep everywhere. You arrive at Philadelphia's iconic City Hall, normally the crown jewel of municipal determination, now flanked on all sides by people slumped against the marble like decorative human gargoyles. A man dressed as Benjamin Franklin snores peacefully beneath a statue. A tourist collapses mid-selfie. The entire plaza has the energy of a group nap that no one agreed to but everyone joined. You tiptoe through the scene like you're in a very polite zombie movie. City Hall, with its towering architecture and stern stone reliefs, was built to convey authority, stability and civic pride. But tonight, it looks more like a giant daycare during nap time. People lie on the steps in perfect unplanned symmetry, some curled up, some stretched out, one using their souvenir tote bag as a pillow. Even the statues seem to be judging the situation with stoic confusion. You pause at the edge of Dilworth Park where unconscious residents are scattered across the fountain area like they fainted in formation. A jogger has collapsed mid-stretch, frozen in a heroic pose, as if performing patriotic yoga. A businessman sleeps face down on the concrete with his briefcase tucked neatly under his arm, responsible even in unconsciousness. The sound of light snoring echoes between the stone columns. It's surprisingly peaceful here, like the city finally decided to take a collective moment of silence and accidentally dozed off. A police officer walks by, gently nudging a sleeping man out of the bike lane. The man rolls a few inches, adjusts his jacket and continues snoring. You wander deeper into the plaza, catching glimpses of people tucked into corners like cats seeking optimal heat sources. One woman sleeps beneath the giant bronze statue of William Penn. Another rests at the base of the flagpole like a weary patriot. A man wrapped in an eagle's blanket lies atop a bench, arm draped dramatically over his forehead, auditioning for the role of exhausted Victorian hero. As you approach the entrance, you notice the custodial crew has also adapted. 2 workers use long-handled dusters not just for sweeping, but for lightly tapping sleeping citizens who are blocking the doorway. "Ma'am, sir, little scooch." Please, they whisper, nudging them like fragile pottery. To your left, you spot the man dressed as Benjamin Franklin again. His costume wig has slipped sideways, giving him the look of a colonial statesman who partied too hard. His snoring is rhythmic, almost musical, matching the slow pulse of the traffic lights around the plaza. A few pigeons stand guard near him, as though sworn to protect this founding father from sidewalk hazards. A group of tourists approaches, speaking in hushed, reverent tones as though they've stumbled upon a sacred ritual. One woman takes a picture of her husband pretending to sleep among the real sleepers until he accidentally falls asleep for real. She shrugs, pockets her phone, and sits beside him. The city has a way of pulling you into its rhythms whether you intended or not. The tower's clock bells ring out, echoing across the plaza with majestic authority, but instead of inspiring patriotic resolve, the sound triggers 3 simultaneous collapses within your line of sight. One of them happens mid-stride, resulting in a slow-motion fold that is both graceful and deeply relatable. You sit on a nearby ledge, drinking in the scene. The marble beneath you is cold, but the atmosphere is warm with collective exhaustion. A city worker strolls past holding a clipboard labelled Unconscious Density Log, West Plaza. They mark a few boxes, nod at you politely and continue their rounds. As the evening deepens, the plaza glows beneath lamplight. The sleeping figures create gentle, organic shapes against the rigid architecture. It looks like a Renaissance painting if the subject were general fatigue of the modern urban population. You inhale, exhale, and lean back. And for the first time today, you feel it, a sense of belonging. Because here at City Hall, Philadelphia's beating stone heart, everyone collapses eventually. And honestly, you're impressed by how graceful they make it look. You walk into a well-loved cheesesteak spot, expecting sizzling grills and loud opinions about onions. Instead, the cook stands frozen with a spatula suspended mid-air, as though someone hit pause on his entire life. Customers wait patiently, because honestly, this happens every 20 minutes now. The smell of steak, peppers, and faint medical-grade sedation drifts through the air as you place your order gently, hoping he wakes up before the sandwich does. You stand behind a man wearing an Eagles jacket who clearly hasn't slept since the NFC Championship game 3 years ago. He sighs wistfully at the unmoving spatula, as though reminiscing about a time when cooks were conscious and cheesesteaks appeared in a timely fashion. A woman near the condiment station leans on the counter, asleep with her hand still gripping a packet of ketchup. Another customer snoozes upright against the soda machine, his cup strategically placed beneath the dispenser should gravity pull him sideways. The grill itself is still warm enough to keep the onions sweating and the steak sizzling in a slow, low-key way, like it's trying to carry the restaurant on its back. Every now and then the cook's suspended hand twitches, sending a small shower of peppers sliding across the metal with a soft shh. You watch closely. Everyone watches closely. It's the most suspenseful moment of your day. Finally, after a dramatic minute that feels like the season finale of a cooking show, the cook's eyes flutter, his knees wobble. His soul re-enters his body with visible reluctance. He blinks twice, then resumes cooking as though absolutely nothing unusual occurred. The entire line releases a synchronized exhale. Someone claps softly. Whiz or provolone, he asks you, voice thick with sleep and civic dedication. You respond quickly, fearing he may re-enter hibernation at any moment. He nods and begins chopping the steak with gusto. Well, mild gusto. Midway through the second chop, he pauses again. His arm freezes. His eyes drift shut like he's been unplugged. The entire customer base now works as a team. Various strangers step forward to support him emotionally, verbally, spiritually. "Stay with us, brother," someone murmurs. Deep breaths. Another encourages. A woman by the napkin dispenser shouts, "Think of the hoagie rolls." It seems to help. His eyelids flutter. After a few heroic blinks, the cook snaps back into action. He finishes chopping the steak with renewed purpose, not fast but determined, a marathon runner of the culinary arts. You notice the staff has adapted to the crisis. The cashier rings up orders with one hand while gently repositioning unconscious customers with the other. A teenager behind the counter has the specific job of cook-waker, which involves tapping the cook's shoulder at strategic moments or quietly shouting motivational phrases like "pepper timing" or "You're doing amazing, sir. Your order nears completion." The cook, still half in dreamland, scoops the steaming meat into the roll with surprising accuracy. He turns to grab the cheese, provolone this time, and successfully places 2 slices over the top. Then he pauses again. "No, no, no," the crowd whispers collectively. He wavers. He dips. His knees soften like warm saltwater taffy. At the last possible second, he jolts upright and completes the sandwich. The room erupts into polite, tired applause, the kind of applause people reserve for kindergarten recitals and zoning board approvals. You receive your cheesesteak reverently. It's warm, fragrant, melty, and only slightly lopsided from the cook's gravitational battles. You find a seat among several napping patrons arranged around the dining area like decorative throw pillows. Biting in, you taste pure Philadelphia. Steak, cheese, onions, and the faint flavour of perseverance. A man next to you snores face down into his sandwich. You wish him well. As you take your last bite, you glance toward the counter. The cook has fallen asleep again, standing peaceful, spatula in hand. Honestly, that might be the most Philadelphia thing you've ever seen. As you stroll along Market Street, you notice an eerie synchronization. A bus rolls to a stop, a cyclist drifts sideways into a bush, and a jogger collapses gracefully against a parking meter. The city seems to glitch, like an overworked computer buffering through too many tabs. You stand perfectly still, unsure whether to keep walking or wait for everyone else to reboot. A pigeon looks at you knowingly. It's seen this before. There's a stillness in the air, thick, expectant, like the moment right before a sneeze or a power outage. The usual noise of the city falls away. No honking, no yelling, no screeching brakes. Even the wind seems to hesitate, unsure whether it should continue gusting or politely join the stillness. It's unsettling. Philadelphia is a loud city. Silence here feels unnatural, like an uncharacteristic moment of emotional vulnerability. The bus driver is frozen mid-turn, one hand on the wheel, the other clutching a cup of coffee he definitely didn't get to finish. His eyes droop shut, his chin sinks to his chest, and he slumps gently against the glass. The bus remains idling, engine humming, heat blasting, like a mechanical babysitter watching over the unconscious. Across the street, the cyclist who toppled into the bush is partially upright, legs still pedalling weakly as though finishing a dream race. They snore into the leaves. The bush rustles, not in protest, but in resigned acceptance. This is its life now. Near a storefront, a delivery worker collapses onto a stack of cardboard boxes, creating a surprisingly comfortable-looking nest. A pair of tourists freeze mid-argument, one pointing accusingly at Google Maps, the other slumping sideways with the slow dignity of a decorative plant wilting in real time. You start to suspect that the entire city has entered a kind of mass microhibernation. You lower your voice to a whisper, instinctively, as if speaking loudly might disrupt whatever bizarre system is unfolding. "Is everyone okay?" you say to no one in particular. A passerby collapses in response. Market Street feels like a scene from an avant-garde performance piece titled Urban Exhaustion, the musical. People lie at artistic angles along benches, doorways, planter boxes, and bike racks. A man slumps against a newsstand, knocking over a stack of newspapers that flutter gently in the cold breeze. The headline reads, "City officials say remain calm as incidents continue. You appreciate the irony." Then there are the pigeons, seemingly the only creatures unfazed. One struts directly in front of you, giving a nod that feels oddly reassuring, as if saying, "Relax, rookie, this is Tuesday." Another pigeon hops onto the jogger's knee like it's clocking in for a shift. They survey their domain, guardians of the unconscious. You try taking a tentative step forward. No reaction. You take another step. Still nothing. You begin weaving through frozen commuters, stepping carefully between limbs and shopping bags, like you're navigating a human minefield, except every mine is soft and snoring. A street performer collapses mid-saxophone solo, producing one long somber note that fades into the winter air. His instrument rests beside him. A child walking a dog stumbles gently into a snowbank, the dog immediately sitting beside them with quiet loyalty, tail sweeping the ground like a comforting metronome. Cars remain idling in perfect rows. Drivers collapse behind their wheels. It's surreal, like the city pressed pause by accident and never hit play again. A traffic light cycles through, green, yellow, red, completely ignored by the unconscious participants in this spontaneous tableau. You stop in the centre of the crosswalk as the wind picks back up, brushing your coat and scattering a few loose receipts across the street. The atmosphere shifts. A subtle buzzing begins, people waking, stretching, coughing, mumbling half sentences they didn't finish before collapsing. The jogger lifts their head. The cyclist rolls out of the bush. The bus driver jerks awake and immediately apologises to no one. The street performer resumes mid-note like the interruption never happened. The city unfreezes. Life resumes. And you realise something important. This wasn't an emergency. It was just a mass synchronized nap break. Philadelphia may be many things, but predictable. Never. So tonight, after wandering through a Philadelphia that somehow learned to nap standing up, drift in and out of consciousness like a citywide screensaver, and fold itself gently around an epidemic no one asked for, take a moment to breathe. Slow. Easy. Let the weight of the day slide off your shoulders like a scepter rider who finally gave up fighting gravity. Because somehow, amazingly, you made it. You navigated collapsing strangers, sleepy baristas, half-awake police officers, and pigeons that now seem more alert than the general population. You survived dodging graceful sidewalk faceplants, stepping over unconscious cheesesteak enthusiasts, and trying to get a pharmacist's attention in a city where everyone is doing their absolute best, even if half of them are unconscious while doing it. In its own bizarre way, 2026 Philadelphia showed you something profoundly human, that people adapt, even to the absurd, that communities keep working, keep moving, keep checking on each other, even when the world feels like it's been tranquilized mid-sentence. Beneath the chaos, there's resilience, there's humour, there's compassion, in strangers gently propping up a sleeping man so he doesn't slide into traffic. There's hope in the ER nurse who hasn't sat down in 8 hours, but still tucks a blanket around someone who collapsed in the waiting room. And as you settle into your own bed, your clean sheets, your warm blankets, your blessedly stable mattress, maybe whisper a quiet thank you for all the comforts you didn't have to fight for today. You didn't collapse next to a pretzel cart. You didn't freeze mid-stride. You didn't have to pray the person napping on your bus driver wasn't the actual bus driver. Because history, even the weird modern kind, is a reminder of just how stubborn and adaptable humans really are. Whether it's medieval winters or modern pharmaceuticals gone sideways, people still find ways to laugh, to help, to keep going. Even when the world feels off balance, even when it tilts into the surreal, people still look out for one another, even if they have to do it while someone is unconscious on their shoe. So let your muscles loosen. Let your breath slow. Let sleep come for you gently. Not like Medetomidine, but like a soft, warm tide pulling you peacefully toward rest. You're safe. You're warm. You're here, in a world that may be strange but is still full of kindness and small, stubborn light. And as you drift off, remember, history isn't just suffering and absurdity. It's proof that people endure, improvise, and somehow keep going, even in the most ridiculous of circumstances. Good night, my friend. May your dreams be calm, your body stay upright, and may tomorrow greet you with steadier ground and steadier people. Sleep well,